What if we could see the world through the lens of a shaman's mind? Today, author, energy healer, and shamanic practitioner Jonathan Hammond brings the magical spectrum of infinite possibilities, unseen truths, alternative realities, and spiritual support to having a shaman's mind. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Inspire Health Podcast. Today's show, we are going to be talking to Jonathan Hammond. And Jonathan Hammond is a shamanic practitioner, and this is a really packed episode. We go through so many things together, and one of the things I really love about the shamanic wisdom is particularly the practice that he studied, which is the Hawaiian Huna tradition for shamanic practitioners. And I feel like there is so many pieces that is covered within that body of work that covers so many other pieces of work that I've done over the years with different teachers and read different books and different courses. A lot of it is really pulled together under these teachings. So you're going to get a lot of information in this one episode. And just some of the things to look forward to. You're going to learn how to consciously change your life using the 7 key principles of Huna Shamanism. Discover the 3 selves and how they became separated. We're going to uncover the superpowers of what they call Hawaiian magic, discover the true meaning of the word Aloha, and then learn to apply these skills to get your unconscious mind on board with your dreams and aspirations so that ultimately you can put yourself back in the driver's seat of your own life. I mean, that's really what it's all about. One of the big messages that I keep trying to bring about for people is how we can get back in the driver's seat of our own life, whether that's in the driver's seat of our own health, of our own happiness, all of these things that ultimately just bring more joy into our lives and allow us to live a bigger, more fulfilling life. So I hope you really enjoy this episode. It was super fun talking to Jonathan. He's a really, really amazing guy and brings a ton of information and wisdom to share with us. Now, before we get into the episode, I just want to say thank you again to our sponsor, Organifi. Now, Organifi's mission is essentially to bring the world's most exotic and powerful superfoods into every household in North America. So they blend these superfoods into these really tasty powders that make them incredibly accessible, that you'd only have to mix with water, and they taste so good and they're so nutritionally dense. So I've talked about a number of them in the past. Their green juice and their gold tea and their immunity and their Organifi Pure. All of these ones are on their website, and they're all really essential for different aspects. Some of them are more specific for immunity, some are more specific for gut and brain function. And then they've got the green juice and the red juice, which I've talked about before. I want to go through a little bit more detail on the red juice specifically today because the red juice is actually my favorite tasting one out of all of the Organifi products. The red juice is really the one that I think is the best tasting one, and they all taste quite good. This one is literally like a berry punch, and when you compare it to some other drinks, it basically ends up being about $1.67 per glass, which is less than you can get a cup of coffee for. It has only 1 gram of sugar. It has 11 different superfoods, no caffeine, and only 30 calories per glass. So when some of my patients are even looking for an alternative to drinking just water all the time, which I recommend, drink lots of water, but sometimes you want to mix it up a little bit. Taking a berry blend like this, which is just packed with all these superfoods which can assist with your energy, it can support your immunity, has strong adaptogenic properties which really help to support the overall wellness for somebody, and it tastes really good. So some of the key things about the red juice that make it so spectacular that it's packed with these 11 different superfoods. It's got 5 different berries and it's got 4 exotic adaptogens. So adaptogens are those key plants that help us deal with stress, and they are time tested in many traditions through Asia and through Europe for centuries and sometimes even up to thousands of years. So some of the superfood adaptogens that are packed into this red juice powder are the cordyceps, which is from ancient India. And this has got a long history of improving energy and mitigating the effects of stress. Reishi mushroom, known as queen of the mushrooms, again, strong adaptogenic effects. And nowadays, that is something that I think almost all of us need to rotate at times, are these adaptogenic superfoods, because everybody is under more stress than I think we have ever been as an entire population. It also has rhodiola and Siberian ginseng. Rhodiola is this, originally it's a Russian superfood that helps with cold environments and helps us deal with physical, emotional, and environmental stress. And Siberian ginseng, which has been used in traditional Chinese medicine for thousands of years to improve stamina and energy. Now, on top of that, it's got a number of different packed berries, and we know berries to be very potent in antioxidants, and we need antioxidants to mitigate the effects of free radical stress on our bodies. Free radical stress, like inflammation, is one of the cornerstones for almost all disease. So when you get a nice packed amount of the benefits of these berries without having too much of the sugar content from them, you can get all of the benefits without any problems. So pomegranate, raspberry, cranberry, blueberry, strawberry, and beets. It's got all of this stuff packed into this really tasty drink. So one of those a day will pack you full of antioxidants and support your stress response. So check out Organifi. If you go to the website www.organifi.com, you can use the code INSPIRE and they will give you 15% off your entire order. Or if you just go to www.organifi.com/inspire, it will take you right to the homepage where you will get 15% off your order. Welcome to the Inspire Health Podcast. Your life is about to get a whole lot better. Have you ever felt like you tried everything and yet still couldn't find the answers or the solutions that you were seeking? Whether you're dealing with chronic illness, physical or emotional pain, I want you to know that your body is the most sophisticated machine on planet Earth. Your body holds unfathomable wisdom. Trust in it and learn from it. Know that there are answers and there are solutions to your specific health challenges. And we will be uncovering all of them here on the Inspire Health Podcast. I'm so excited to be a part of your healing journey. Your transformation starts now. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Inspire Health Podcast. Today's guest is Jonathan Hammond. Jonathan began with a very successful career as an award-winning actor appearing on Broadway and television. Now he devotes his life to being deeply committed to empowering and healing people by bringing indigenous earth wisdom to the modern world as a master teacher and faculty member for Shamanic Reiki Worldwide. Jonathan is a spiritual teacher, energy healer, shamanic practitioner, and author of the Shaman's Mind, Huna Wisdom to Change Your Life. His book helps one learn to think like a shaman. It teaches you to attune yourself to a magical spectrum of infinite possibilities, unseen truths, alternative realities, and spiritual support. When a shaman likes what's happening, they know how to make it better. And when they don't, they know how to change it. The Shaman's Mind is a book that teaches the reader how to align and transform their own mind into one that sees the world through the lens of indigenous healers of old. Welcome to the show.
Aloha, Jason. So great to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. I tell you, when I read that intro to your book, that gets me pretty excited. I think, man, what a powerful skill set for anybody to learn. How do you consciously make changes in your life? And I think I was saying to you earlier, when I first went through your book, I was really amazed at how much amazing wisdom and I think fundamental truth are just packed in each chapter. And I've done a lot of reading and I've done a lot of different courses and stuff over the years, and I feel like the information that you compiled in that book has so much of what I would consider some of the main aspects of things I've learned from lots of different pieces, and it's just like boom, and it's in really user-friendly language, which I really appreciate as well. Now,
thank you.
You're welcome. Now, before we get into the book and talking more about everything with that, I would love to hear your story because you've got an interesting story as far as how you came about becoming so entrenched in shamanism and the Huna wisdom, and you've got an interesting story that happened with you on the volcano when you were in Hawaii. I would love to share with the audience.
Yeah, well, I was in another life. I was a professional actor and worked in New York on Broadway and mainly in theater. I did a little television too. And it wasn't feeling right. It wasn't feeling right for a long time. Despite relative success, it wasn't feeling right. I was never a fame-driven actor. That was never my thing. It was more about telling stories and raising consciousness and that kind of thing. And I was feeling like I just wasn't able to have the reach that I wanted to have. I had always had a pretty rich spiritual life, which I kind of thought for a while was just to traverse the difficulties of show business, just to give me some tools to help me cope. But my spiritual life kept taking up more and more and more space, and then um, I had a private practice in counseling and energy healing, although I was still an actor. And then it was actually on the volcano in Maui where I had, and I write about it in the book, I had a visitation. That's the only way I can describe it with whatever you want to call it. That's what happened. And received a very clear message that it was really time to change my life, and that it was time to hang up the acting and go into this work full time. And it was terrifying, because it was the only thing I ever thought I wanted to do, and this new life was relatively uncharted territory in terms of doing it full time. But once I made the decision, and once I had that experience, things just became very, very clear that I was on the right path, and I actually find that my acting life really infuses what I do now. When you think of acting, you learn the blocking, you learn the lines, and then you hope for inspiration to come through. And it's really not that much different with the work that I'm doing now. But yeah, that happened in the volcano in Maui, which then led me to, at that point I had already worked with shamans on 3 different continents, and but there was something about Hawaii, not only that experience, but other really formative spiritual experiences that I had on the islands, that made me think, is there something here? And then I began to read about the Huna, the indigenous philosophy, spiritual philosophy of Hawaii, as well as some of the spiritual traditions of Hawaii. And what I found was that what I thought I knew, and what I thought I was doing in my private practice in New York, the tenets of it were already largely had been excavated by the Hawaiians. The Hawaiians were onto things like the unconscious mind thousands of years before Freud and Jung. And they were onto the idea of energy, and of how our thoughts create reality, et cetera, et cetera. And so what I found in working with the indigenous philosophies of Hawaii were corollaries with my own ways of working, and my own shamanic understanding. And it's an understanding that I have found with all the indigenous cultures with which I've worked. All shamans tend to think very similarly. They may have different local traditions, or different spiritual practices, but they all tend to see the world and see themselves in the world through a very specific lens. And what I found in the Huna philosophy was a philosophy that felt related to all the shamanic cultures with which I had studied. So that then became, I felt like I was onto something, and that became the reason why I wanted to share this, because it's very practical philosophy, very practical wisdom that all shamans tune into, at least the ones that I've met, that all tune into, and we can all use this philosophy and integrate it with ourselves, with discipline, and see the world and see the co-creation of our life through the shaman's mind, through the lens of how shamans think, how the indigenous healers think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and was there anything specific then about the Hawaiian tradition that grabbed you more so than some of the other ones? Because I understand too from reading your work that basically, and talking to other people that were shamans from other places, there's definitely a lot of it has got the similar concepts wrapped around it. But was there something specifically about the Hawaiian tradition that really resonated with you? And also, where did Huna evolve from? And I think tied with the story with the ancient Pacific continent with Mu.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Well, if you take a shamanic journeying class, you're guided towards the experience of it more than you're guided towards understanding it. And there are no shamanic manifestos and set of commandments to follow. We actually have very little to go on for the Western mind to really understand what's happening when we're engaging in shamanic practice. What actually is that? And what I hadn't found anywhere else was a philosophical way in which to think about shamanic practice and how shamans think. So that's why I was attracted to Hawaii. The other thing about Hawaii, as you mentioned, Hawaii sits on a vortex. There was an ancient, huge continent in the middle of the South Pacific. Some call Mu, some non-Hawaiians sometimes call it Lemuria. And this was a huge continent that existed that was either the promulgator of esoteric wisdom out to the world, or the recipient of so much esoteric wisdom from the world. We don't really know, but the idea is that it was a real hotbed for spiritual enlightenment, and the people of Mu, or the Lemurians, were said to be these spiritually gifted people who were so in tune with so many things. And the Polynesian, the language Polynesian, is said to, there are etymological correspondences in other languages continents away that correlate with some of the spiritual ideas that come out of the Polynesian language. And Huna is basically based on words from Hawaiian that have been upgraded and translated into ways of thinking that again enter us into the shaman's mind. But if you've been to Hawaii, there's a sense of, even when you're there, there's a sense of, even to fathom this place, I have to engage my imagination, just to even see, feel what I am, and you feel the mana, or the power of the land, and that's very much infused there. It's even I've even heard it described as the heart chakra of the earth. So it really just has this power. So it's not surprising to me that the land itself holds this philosophy, and so much of the Hawaiian spiritual traditions do as well.
Yeah, I love you said some really neat things there. Even when you were talking about a lot of the practice that you were doing was experiential, less about the understanding. In general, I think that's, and you talked about the engaging the imagination. These are, in my mind, even especially right now, more than ever, I feel like this is such an important piece. It's like, I feel like our understanding of how we understand anything, the world around us, it's, I mean, it's got a box around it, right? Based on how we've lived our lives and what we've been taught. And I mean, it goes well into multi-generations. But what I like about when people have to have individual experiences and engage imagination, you naturally start to, well, if you experience something that you don't understand, well, now that's got to kind of bust open your box a little bit to stretch your boundaries a little bit. And I think ultimately that's where we start to have these changes in beliefs, and we start to grow, and we start to expand a little bit more.
With the imagination, from my perspective, is the most powerful tool of the shaman. Even when someone's coming to me for healing, by the way, I wouldn't call myself a shaman, I would call myself a shamanic practitioner. But when someone's coming to me for healing, I'm imagining them well. That's my job. And I'm imagining how their difficulties serve them. And in the imagination, because thoughts create reality, that whatever we're imagining actually has a basis in reality. And so these are all ideas that are held in this Huna philosophy. So the imagination is so important because it enters us into the hidden realms that are underneath everything. When you think of what we did as children with imaginary friends and creating hidden worlds and all of that, shamanism is about going back to something that we've been doing for a long time. Shamans play with drums and bells and imaginary friends, and there's such deep wisdom in that enters us into a different kind of truth, other than the consensus reality that we're all adhering to. I often say that consensus reality is one slice of an apple pie, but shamanic reality is the entire rest of the pie. There's so much that doesn't meet the eye, and the imagination enters us into that. Yeah.
When I was talking to to Paul Selig the other day. He was saying something similar to that, and he had said it's like all we know is we order off of the same menu that basically we've created, and we just don't know anything else to even order. So where we're kind of, and I think partly where I'm hoping that we keep expanding and moving towards is that we start to see the other parts of that pie, and we start to see whole different groups of menus that we haven't even heard of before. And that's really exciting to me. And you know, when you talk about imagination, I'm an osteopathic practitioner as well, and a lot of osteopathy is completely engaging your imagination so you can visualize and see what's going on, and you are in this dialogue with the body. But a lot of that dialogue is engaging your imagination to visualize and picture and see what's happening and to try and feel it and all of these different things. And I find that the osteopathic practitioners that are usually the best practitioners have a very strong ability to engage in that imagination as far as what's going on.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah, I find it all very fascinating. Now, in your book, you mentioned that this book is about becoming a finder and no longer a seeker. Can you explain what you mean by that?
Well, I think that contemporary spirituality is about attracting a lot of seekers, attracting a lot of people who are looking for a way, and someone else has it, and we never actually get there. And I think that at a certain point, we all have to indoctrinate. You know, Huna is so much about our own personal power. And at some point, we have to indoctrinate ourselves with a sense of, I know enough to take authority over my life. And if I'm actually following what any good, legitimate spiritual path is teaching me, if I'm actually following it, if I'm actually taking responsibility for myself and adhering to what I'm learning, I actually step into someone who has realized something, rather than someone who keeps their own authority at arm's length from themselves. And I think so often we're trying to emulate these teachers that we project on them enlightenment. We project on them that they know something that we don't know, and they really don't. The only difference is that maybe they're living it more. And so when I say this is a book about becoming a finder and no longer a seeker, it's about that it's time. It's time that if you've been on a spiritual journey for a while, if you've been on the path for a while, if you're reading a lot of esoteric wisdom and you're showing up, you get to graduate enough to where you claim your own authority. So often with a lot of the healers that I train, the biggest thing that gets them from student to actual healer is the self-esteem that says, I'm a healer. And only you can really make that for yourself. You in conjunction with the spiritual energies of the universe, so to speak. But it's so important that we do that, and that we claim we claim something for ourselves. You know, just to talk chakras for a minute, which is not part of our Huna system, but it's coming up. The solar plexus, the solar plexus that's where we hold our sense of self, our sense of self-esteem. And the solar plexus is connected to the sun. So to claim an identity, to claim a sense of self, is to borrow from arguably the most powerful thing in the entire universe, which is the sun. So becoming a finder is claiming that for ourselves. And in that, we claim so much power, and we need to. We have to do our work. We have to study and all those things. But it's important that we all feel a sense of we can step up into the next thing. So that's what I meant by that.
Yeah. Well, and one of the chapters in your book is that all power comes from within. And when we talk about all power comes from within, what exactly do you mean by that when we talk about power?
When you think about the nature of power, what is true power? Power over something is only going to lead to retaliation and fear, right? So it's not real power. Power against something is only going to lead to resistance. But the power to empower means that we actually have the power because we're giving it away. Mm-hmm. And so what this philosophy is getting at with that particular principle, all power comes from within, is that we are all an inseparable part of an infinitely powerful universe. We are inseparable from that infinitude, and that powerful infinitude resides at the place that we each call myself. So that means that if we allow ourselves to, we create our lives only from ourselves. And it's so important that we get this, because sociologically, we are expected and indoctrinated to assimilate, to fit in, to give our power away to the power structures. So many of us are living lives based on what we're told on television, what we're supposed to look like, what our money's supposed to look like, what men are, what women are, etc. And to live a spiritual life, to live a life where you're following your own inner directives, because that's really what living a spiritual life is. Because when you think about it, what are you doing? You're following your gut, you're following invisible forces. That's just between you and you. And so to claim that for yourself, to claim your own authority. And if you think of the word authority, that word author is in there. Authoring your life can only come through you. Now, there are plenty of people who don't do it, who just assimilate and fit in and keep up with the Joneses. But the idea behind this philosophy and this principle is about that the power to create your life comes only through you. If I had to say that there was one thing I was doing with all my clients, I'm teaching them and showing them and guiding them to get in their body and to stay there and to feel their feelings. And as basic as that is, we all pull away from our bodies, we pull away from our feelings, we pull away from our experience in order to assimilate. But to get inside there is to actually find yourself. We're wired to, because what's in there? Nature. We are nature beings. So if we are in ourselves, feeling our feelings, following our own inner directives, we're doing what nature's doing, because that's what nature's doing. And in shamanism, we revere nature. Nature never denies itself what's good for it. It never tells itself no. It doesn't have a low self-esteem. Nature just wants what it wants. The forest reaches towards the sky to take in the rain. It extends its roots down into the soil, and it just wants what it wants. And it's in the constant process of growth and creation. And so to claim ourselves as a being of nature, as no different than the forest, is to know that we are only always moving towards growth and creation. We're interconnected to everything. And when we say no to ourselves, we are actually doing something that is unnatural, that is not mirrored in nature. So that's what I mean by all power comes from within. From that perspective, it's a very shamanic idea.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think one of the most important parts of that is that in order to connect to that power, like you said, we need to be connected to the body. And we are living at a time where we are probably, as a populace, more disconnected from our body than ever. And it's an interesting thing. I was doing a talk on this just a while ago, and I always have these conversations with my wife around stuff too, because it's just such interesting times. And I feel like in a lot of ways we have, like you had mentioned, given up our sense of personal power to other authorities to tell us what it is that what is correct and what's true. And a part of what I feel like is missing so much is that it's been so pushed this last one, and I'm not by any means anti-science or anti-logic. I think those are brilliant and they have a place, but it's almost like what has happened is that those have become the only recognition for truth, and that gut instinct and that heart wisdom that is inherent within us, if it can't be proved in a certain way, seems to get discounted. And my interpretation of this is that logic and science and everything is wonderful when it's guided with an intact sense of gut instinct and heart intelligence. And if those things are married together, now you can really move yourself through this world in a place that understands truth. But I feel like that's where the disconnect is. And this is why people are floating around in a state of fear all the time, because they're so disconnected to their own sense of truth.
Yeah, two ideas there that are so helpful. When you think of giving your power away to authority, to whatever that established authority might be, and if we're going along with this principle in Huna that says all power comes from within, then we have to remember that even in giving, that it is your own inner authority, your own inner power that decides to give your power away. You
Yeah.
know, that's such an important point. And one of the other principles of Huna, the seventh principle of Huna, says effectiveness is the measure of truth, which means that it's only what's true is only what works for us. And that's so highly individual for each person. And so that's why I can work with someone and get their cancer numbers down, because we're working with energy and emotion and spirit, and it's because that's what I know to be true and effective, and it's what an actual allopathic medicine would say he's loony, he's not even doing anything.
Yeah.
So it's so important. It's so important that we see that the only absolute truth is that everything is.
Mm-hmm.
Everything else is just something else that someone made up. So it's only what is true for you, what works for you, that is actually truth.
Yeah, and I remember hearing it in the same way. If you want to know what's really true, or if your life is actually moving in a direction that is sort of beneficial for you, it's
Mm-hmm.
like take note on a regular basis of how you're feeling and look at what your life is showing you. And those will be the best guides at a very simplistic way of what direction you're moving in. And then that you can start to then have some discernment around maybe what do you introduce to your life. Is it making you feel better? Are you moving in the right direction? Or do you feel better sometimes to disengage from certain things? Like from my understanding, I'd say most regular media right now I would disengage from, and I would go spend more time in nature. We live right now, we're on Vancouver Island,
Mm-hmm.
and took the kids down, and we spent part of the day sitting down watching the surfers out on the
Mm-hmm.
break over there and walking through the forest. And the entire family felt great. Where I'm thinking, like, so often it's like, and I'm not saying everybody has the opportunity to do that, but it doesn't have to be that. You could go through a park, or you could have an area in your house where you're connected to that, or just don't be exposed to certain things that kind of grab you in a way that doesn't necessarily make you feel good. But it's an individual thing. It's like, just pay attention to how things start to make you feel. But I think part of that is just, I feel like it's so disconnected. Where do you start the process then on reconnecting to that? Because I think if people are going to reclaim their inheritance, which I think is that inner power, how do you start the process then of reconnecting back to the body from a shaman's perspective? Where do you begin that process?
Well, you just said a lot, because I think looking at your life, as simplistic as it is, your life is telling you what you're thinking. And to go with this philosophy is saying one of the primary principles in this philosophy is that the world is what you think it is. So that doesn't just mean that your experience of the world will be based on how you think about it. It's also saying that the world itself, that your world itself, will create itself based on how you think about it. Which means that when you look at your life and you see the things in your life that you like, or you see the things in your life you don't like, there is a degree of complicity within yourself that, at least from this philosophy, that created those circumstances.
Mm-hmm.
And to look at those things is actually to harness power. Because you actually, even the things that you don't like, you say, oh, I have a degree of complicity with that thing that I don't like. What am I thinking? Yeah, and so the easiest, the most basic way to look at things are what's the negative loop? What's the negative polarity that keeps presenting itself in your mind? And it'll be about how you look. It'll be about I don't have enough money. I'll never have enough money. It'll be about I don't look right. It'll be that there's something wrong with me. It'll be whatever. Those things that are always perpetuating themselves, and they're just wounds. They're just mistakes. They're just a case of mistaken identity that we learned as children, and to actually name them, is to then begin the process of saying this, if what I think creates my world, and I'm thinking this most of the time, I should probably change that. And as simple as that is, people don't, we're mired in cynicism. We're mired in our wounds. We're mired in closing against ourselves. I mean, this is in some ways the human condition. But to actually harness our power and our choice to change that belief Even if at first we don't believe it, fake it till you make it. Change that belief enough to where you're saying, I'm not doing that one anymore, I'm doing this. Over and over and over again. The one thing I'll say about all the shamans that I've worked with, and certainly my teacher, Serge King from Hawaii, is that they are the most awake people. Serge is 84 years old. I remember taking a class with him. He taught a class all day, and the next day we came in for class, and how was everyone's night? It was great. Oh, we watched a documentary, and I decided to switch the language because I wanted to practice my Portuguese. And so I translated my Portuguese for my the movie we watched in Portuguese for my wife because I just wanted, and 84, and it's just like so awake to the moment, so awake to what we're actually creating in the moment. And one of the Huna principles talks about the power of the present moment. We hear this a lot with mindfulness and being present and all that, but from a shamanic perspective, the now is about what we do in it. And so one of the principles in Huna is that now is the moment of power, because now is the moment where we can access power, because now is the only place where we can do anything. And so to get in the now is to really look at, what am I thinking? What am I believing? What polarity, positive or negative, am I focusing on? It doesn't mean that the doubts won't come in and the fear won't come in. Yeah, it'll be that. But if you're in the now, you can go, I see you over there. Thanks for your input, but we're going to do this. Mm-hmm. And you can only do that right now.
And do you break down in the book some of the different parts of the now, or some of the different aspects of now a little bit, as far as where we really want to be focusing on with the now and what parts of the now maybe aren't so beneficial? Can you break that down just a little bit too for people? Because I think what you said, and I get where you're going with it too. I'm picturing the average person that's kind of like, well, my now right now is this is going on, this is going on, this is going on, this is going on. So I am like deeply in a state of like fear and panic and worry or anger or whatever it might be. Mm-hmm. So then they're like, well, that is my now. So how do you explain that to somebody from this perspective?
Well, it's you have to take care of yourself. What I mean by that is that if you're creating a now that's full of fear, you're begetting more fear. If you're creating a now that's full of love, you're begetting more love. And so the easiest way to think about it is that the ways in which we are taking the power of the now and creating a mess is when we scare ourselves. A lot of times, this happens a lot with clients. We haven't seen them for a couple of weeks, and they come in and they're really freaked out about whatever it is. And I'll just kind of look at them. I'll sit back and I'll look at them arms folded, and I'll be like, "You've been at it. You have been at it. You have taken those negative thought forms and you have gathered them close to your heart, and you have sniffed them and you have put them in your body, and you're creating alchemy with those negative thought forms. You are just going to town on that, and you can do the same thing with the positive polarity. Does it require faith? Yeah, it requires faith, sometimes. But the alternative is, we are, because our thoughts create reality, that means that we are alchemically creating reality based on what we're doing. And so to take responsibility for that is to take responsibility for the fact that we are all alchemists. And we are either alchemically creating negative circumstances, fearful circumstances, tension, or we're not. And you can only do that right now. And that's why even your suggestion to, probably a good idea to turn off the television and go outside, it really is a good idea. It really is a good idea. And if you are going to focus on it, focus on the people, places, and things that you think are helping that negative situation, not the negative situation.
Well, and you use the term alchemize, and it seems to me that a lot of around alchemizes doesn't mean you have to completely hide from the feelings that are going on in the world, but a lot of this is actually connecting, feeling it. It almost reminds me of the Tonglen exercise where you breathe in the suffering and you breathe out more the solution. It's Sure. Like, how do you transmute it and transform it into something, but so that it's not weighing you down and pulling you down by the ankles, and then that starts to, like you said, that's where you start to create more and more of your world from that place.
Yeah, and just to say, if in shamanism we emulate and we revere nature. But there are plenty of things in nature that we don't like. We don't like tarantulas. We don't like great white sharks. We don't like tsunamis. We don't like cancer. But we don't actually think those things aren't supposed to exist. We don't like them, but we don't think they're not supposed to be there. They serve a purpose. And so being in the now is also about, if this anger is there, that's directive. That's telling me something. That's saying a boundary's got to be crossed. That's saying this isn't good enough. If jealousy is coming up, that's saying I want what that guy has. That's directive. It depends on how you take action on it. But even, we don't shy away from a shamanic perspective. We don't shy away from our darker colors. We don't want to consciously create them. But we don't shy. But if they are naturally occurring, if they are spontaneous, that means they're coming out of our nature, and we're supposed to look at them. They have valuable information for us.
Yeah, exactly. Valuable information. I think that's the best way to look at all of this, rather than getting caught up in good emotions, bad emotions. It's emotion, it's an experience, and what is it telling you? And shine lights on it, because when you do that, that's where you start to make the connections. I would love to hear a little bit about Watiko. So there was some things, I swear, you must have been tapped in when you wrote this book for what was coming, because when I was reading the first parts, I was like, holy cow, like I got goosebumps reading part of it, because it was so in line with what's kind of been going on. But the shamans in Hawaii, or the Hawaiians, call a specific virus or parasite, sort of like a spiritual virus or parasite, that the Cree tribe in North America called, the Hawaiians call this Watiko. And that this is basically this contagious psycho-spiritual disease of the human soul. And and then we'll go into the next piece of this, but I wonder if you can unpack that a little bit as far as what that is and how that is permeating culture now.
Yeah, so Watigo is actually a word that comes out of some of the North American shamanic traditions. The Hawaiians call it the same thing, eepa, which essentially means a real bad spirit.
Okay.
And so the Watiko virus is a virus or parasite of the mind, and it's largely born from our disconnection from the natural world. Because when we're disconnected from the natural world, we're in the world of separation. And as long as we're in the reality of separation, that means I'm out to get you, you're out to get me. That is the seeds of war. That's the seed of every bad ism that there is. And so when we are disconnected from our nature, which is one of interconnection, the second principle of Huna, there are no limits. We're all connected. And when we are disconnected from that, this virus, this self-cannibalizing parasite of the mind can take over, and it can get bigger and bigger and bigger. And what does it look like? It looks like greed. It looks like gluttony. It looks like dominion over nature. It looks like racism. It looks like hatred. It looks like hoarding of wealth. And you've seen the people who are truly afflicted with this, and it just gets worse and worse and worse and worse, to the point where it takes them over, and they'll kill each other over the same thing. So that's what this virus or parasite of the mind is, and its antidote is simply right relationship with the earth, love, interconnection, a sense that we're all in this together, a sense that separation is only a useful illusion, but it's not the nature of reality. See, if you think of interconnection, just like if you take a forest and you just look at the forest, it's all working together. Every part of it is necessary. And in the same way, if you think of yourself as an individual wave in an ocean that cannot extricate itself from the ocean, that's to see yourself clearly. Which means that any individual action that we take towards our own self-investment, towards our own healing, towards our own growth, towards bringing more love into our life, has a substantive and direct correlation with the all. And that's why if we just each individually do our part. So when you look at like everything that's going on, and all the tumultuousness and and the creepiness and all of that, if you just think like, how do I and you feel overwhelmed by it, just do your part, because your part is connected to the all. My Hawaiian teacher says, if you want to heal someone or something, think of them or think of that thing and you feel good.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what this is getting at. And that's the antidote. The antidote to Wetiko or Eepa is aloha. Aloha means the sharing of life force. The sharing of life force is the definition of love.
Yeah, it's so profoundly true, and it's so funny how it's become so opposite in common culture. I think about when I'll see patients that are ridden with guilt, or for example, where someone has something hard that happens to them, and the person gets caught up more. And I'm not saying you don't feel this initially, but it's like, I feel so bad about it. And then they actually stay in the feeling of bad about it,
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to, if we really want to try and send them something that's going to be beneficial, can we transmute that into something that ultimately would be like the gift that we would want to be able to send them? That would be the solution to it. Or how can we send them a vibration that's from a higher frequency or something along those lines that will actually be of service to them, as opposed to kind of pulling it down. I remember one of my teachers, she
Yeah.
said, Jason, what happens when you climb in the mud puddle with somebody? I said, you both
Mm-hmm.
get dirty. And she goes, right, but you also raise the level of the mud for both of you. And
Mm-hmm.
I was like, it's so true. She says, somebody always has to be on the outside offering them the branch, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So, but I
Yeah.
feel like we're almost conditioned to feel bad, almost in some ways.
Mm-hmm.
It's an interesting, it's just an interesting one wherever that sort of started, but it seems like the opposite is very true. Even when we pray, it's like a lot of times prayer comes out of a place of fear more so than a place of connection to what it is that we're wanting to create.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. When anyone is coming to me with a problem, whether or not that be an illness, a relationship breaking up, they lost their job, they're questioning long held values. I know, and this isn't some of the time. This is every time. The hidden gifts of the soul are held in the difficulty. Because the difficulty, if the world is what you think it is, you create your world based on your thoughts. The difficulty is simply the effect of what you've been doing for a long time. And so the light of the new awareness is about like, this is what I've been doing. This is the result of this. And so if you can look at the hardships of your life as the opportunities that they are. It doesn't mean to like them. It doesn't mean they're fun. But if you can look at them as the opportunities that they are to wake you up, to say, this isn't good enough. That's why you have this result. This is what you've
Mhm.
been doing. This is why you have this result. Then you all of a sudden you're back in your own power, and you're claiming power and choice for yourself again. And to make that choice, to see the difficulties and to reframe the difficulties as the opportunity. In Huna, we think of choice as a magical power. And that's what we're doing when we're looking at the difficulties in our lives and saying, oh, this is meant to wake me, always, this is meant to wake me up. This is meant for me to look at, excavate in myself. How am I complicit in the creation of this?
Yeah, and I want to come to the Hawaiian magic part and a couple of those things in just a moment. Can you first just go through, it's such a timely story, and I know you've probably talked about this in lots of interviews, but the Pachacudi story with the eagle and the condor, as far as when I read that, that was where I was reading, I was like, of course, like that's just right on track, as far as, and it makes sense that a lot of these indigenous wisdom, which I think has so much, is so packed with truth. It's like you even said, they've been talking about consciousness and all these different things thousands of years back, and it's like now that's all cutting edge kind of stuff that we're looking at with even quantum physics and everything. So they kind of, but it's like it's all been there for so long, and so that story just to me seems so timely. I'm wondering if you can share it.
Yeah, there are many prophecies about this time on the planet, and they all whether or not you do the Hindu Vedic tradition, they talk about the yugas. You talk about the rainbow prophecy. That's
Mhm.
the Hopi, but this particular one comes from the Quechua tradition, And what they talk about is that this time on the planet, this 500-year interval, which began, we're talking shaman times, so we don't know exactly, but sometime, in the last century, and will go for the next 500 years. They talk about that this is a time when the eagle and the condor will fly together in the same sky. So what does that mean? So they talk about the Quechua talk about the previous 2,000 years has been a time when the eagle predominated. The eagle is visionary. It's materialistic, it builds a beautiful nest, and it's connected to the masculine principles of intellect and innovation. And we see that in science and technology and all of those things. The condor, which is the energy that is going to fly or dance with the eagle now in this next 500-year interval, but has previously now predominated. The condor is considered an environmentally conscious bird. It'll use garbage to make a nest. And it's considered so, it's connected to feminine wisdom, to intuition, to the Quechua believe that the condor may not even fly, but can somehow spiritually move herself. And so this 500-year interval that we're in is about these two birds flying together in the same sky and coming back into balance. Another way of saying it is bringing us back into right relationship with the feminine principles of the earth. And the Quechua also talked about that the entrance of the condor, the entrance of the feminine, the intuitive, would come about because so many beings have incarnated at this time who are part of that solution. And that's why so many people right now are waking up the way that they are. So many people are using this opportunity. I don't know about you, but so many of my clients are actually unfolding spiritually like crazy the last 6 months, And it's about that this time on the planet, so many beings are actually incarnating in order to be part of this change into this new way of being. Even I would go so far as to say that all the millennials, millennials get a bad rap. They get, they're called lazy and they're called entitled, but actually they organically have an environmental consciousness. They organically sort of look at what we've done and they say, I'm not interested. I think I'll stay on my phone, which PS is a metaphor for interconnection that they've held since they were babies, And so many of them, you feel that they are part of the solution. Those kids in Parkland, those kids are like, those are indigo children. Those are people who are part of this change, and it's in their DNA to be part of it, and that's what's happening on the planet right now.
Well, and even I've got a 15-year-old stepson, and it's funny because I will see some of this firsthand with millennials and whatnot. And as frustrating as it can be sometimes from a parent perspective, but at the same point, mostly I think it's frustrating because it's challenging some of my inherent beliefs that are making me have to relook at them. And I'll tell you, one of the big ones is this concept of hard work. It's a really interesting. We have been inundated with work hard. And, I had a karate instructor, my karate instructor for a long time. And one of the things that we would say when we would do this meditation and we would finish, and part of it was actually hard work. That was one of the statements that was passed down through this lineage. And he actually changed it to smart work. And it was like when I first heard that, everybody was kind of like, what? Like, really? But I mean, he's a visionary and he can kind of see that. And now I really appreciate it because I can see, even like for him, my idea of like, you got to work hard, and I'm not saying that's completely bad, but I'm thinking that is one aspect of how something could happen. You can also manifest things in a very fun, easy, enjoyable way, and it doesn't have to be hard. But we've been conditioned with this, even like relationships. I remember growing up, relationships are hard work. And I remember consciously changing that belief because my relationships were all very hard work over and over and over again until I finally realized that and was like, I don't want so what do I want? It's like, okay, relationships require love, they require honesty, they require communication. So it's like, be clear with what they require, but don't make them hard work. You know what I mean? And I feel like this group, my stepson, for example, if I'm trying to get him to, he's always looking to try and find a simpler solution for something. And in my mind, it's like we say, oh, that's lazy or whatever, but it's like, when I reprogram that, it's like, it's not so much lazy, it's actually really trying to see something from another perspective that I just haven't been so that's opposite to what I was ingrained with.
That's right. That's the assimilation that I'm talking about. If we're all born into a collective unconscious that presents us with this is the way it is. We're all born into white people are superior. We're born into that. It's in our textbooks. It's in, that's just an example.
Yeah.
And it goes unquestioned. And when you think about what that is, what that's saying is that you're doing it right. Grade school, high school, college, job, money, success, marriage, retirement, impotence, pension, death. You're good to go. You did it right. And like
Pass,
that's you pass.
congratulations.
That's right. Or the person who is in the job that they despise for 65 years, they get the last 10 to do what they want, but they're so angry and their health is so compromised that and that's a good worker. That's a good man.
Right.
And no, it's not. It's a schmuck. And it's not something that's mirrored in nature. What's mirrored in nature or what's mirrored in the indigenous cultures is that we're in bodies in order to experience the pleasures of the earth. And these bodies are so sensitive and can experience so much. And the earth is so amazing and beautiful, and the tastes and the smells and it's all, it's a very specific opportunity to be in a human body. And we zombify ourselves by following someone else who just wants our money and just wants control over us into these paradigms that we are to follow. And that generation is saying, I don't think I buy that. And not only are they saying that, but they feel like that doesn't feel right. That doesn't feel like
Exactly.
like how I would.
Yeah, exactly. And they haven't been indoctrinated as long, so that they're more connected to when something doesn't resonate with them in a level of truth for them. So they call it very quickly. And I've got a 3 and a 4-year-old, so they know like that. It's like you don't have, you say anything and boom, and it's like they're our biggest teachers, because they
Sure.
write us so much more quickly, because we know that they're connected in a way that is very very true and authentic.
Yeah, I talk a lot about the client that I have. They're usually 38 to 42, and they did all the right things. They went to the right party. They have the money. They whatever. And then 38 to 42, I got to figure out my life. I got to go to Peru and do ayahuasca because I don't know who the hell I am. That's an archetype. That is an archetype that exists, and that's what we're talking about, because they're so indoctrinated into following this thing, and then they get there and they don't feel it. And they go, wait, I was supposed to feel something.
Mm-hmm.
I love the Alan Watts quote. He says, life isn't about getting anywhere in particular. It's more of a musical thing, and we're supposed to dance.
Nice. Yeah, my grandma used to always say well, a little different than that, but she had a little plaque that just says, not to learn to avoid the rain, is to learn how to dance in the storm. So, and and she very much lived her life like that. Now, you had mentioned Hawaiian magic. Let's come back to that, because this is, this is what I think is so interesting about these times. I feel like we are, and like you said, I'm seeing the same thing with patients and clients and whatnot, like huge transitions in, and I mean, part of that is also their bodies are going through chaos, because there's this shift that's going on, and it's kind of like, what the hell is going on? Like, all these things are coming up. I mean, their body is going to tell them. The hidden messages are always stored in the body, and the body will be very clear, and it will always tell you what's going on. But it's part of this sort of, it's coming up so that people can make some of these different transitions and changes, and I think ultimately reconnect back to their center of truth again, and their center of power, much like the work that you're talking about. And even concepts like magic and stuff, it's like, I feel like we've been in some ways indoctrinated, like, ooh, that's woo woo, or it's sort of, black magic or whatever. And it's like, these are really fun ways to just play with some of these things. And really, most of this seems to me like it's really engaging your thoughts, feelings, beliefs, and imagination. And can you share with us what Hawaiian magic is, and why it can be so powerful?
Yeah, well, it's not that different than magic in the other hermetic traditions. But and when we talk about magic, what are we talking about? We're talking about conscious manifestation. We're talking about making something, creating something that wasn't there before, with our intentions, with our thoughts, with our beliefs. And so the simplest way to think about it is that. So let's begin with our mana. So we have our own inner power. And the more that we increase our power through health, through healthy living, through telling the truth, through drinking lots of water, all of those things, the more we feel a sense of entitlement, a sense of I want what I want and it's okay. And one of the fundamental thing about magic is to want what you want and to remove the doubt. That is the most important aspect. And so often we don't even allow ourselves that. And when you don't allow yourself to want what you want, to yearn for what you yearn for, you're already mucking up the energy, you know? So want what you want, that's your own personal mana, your own personal power, your own personal sense of your own charisma. And by charisma, I mean charisma is not just our charm, it's about a divinely conferred power to influence. And so the more that we feel that through our own self-investment, the more entitled we are to our magic. Then, so that's the mana. Then, because there is no separation, there is what the Hawaiians called an Akka Field, AKA. And the Akka Field is the space between things and the space around things. So what the Hawaiians pointed out when they identified this field of potential surrounding and around everything, what they identified was a basic tenet of quantum physics, which is that there's no such thing as empty space. And so this Akka field is a field of potential. And the Akka field lights up based on what we think. So if you and I both identify a certain beach on Kauai right now, and we both are just build up our mana and think about that specific beach, we will cause little changes on that beach, and the Akka carries it. And the thought, the makia, aimed thought, which is what that is translated as Hawaii in Hawaiian, brings that about. So the idea is to focus on what you want with consistency, is to light up that field of potential toward that thing you want. And the more that we focus on it with consistency, the more we elicit the creative energies of the universe, because of Huna's third principle, which says that energy flows where attention goes. So where we place our focus and attention elicit the energies of the universe to bring to us the nearest physical equivalent of whatever we're putting our focus and attention on. Mm-hmm. And that is because we feel it, we want it, that's our mana, because there is a field of potential with which we can connect with anything with our thoughts. With our thoughts and our attention, we elicit the energetic, the influences that bring that thing into being, and we remove the doubt.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's brilliant, and it's so in line with what quantum physics talks about how this actually works. And I remember Joe Dispenza talking about it once, and he would talk about the way you think, like the way the mind focuses, is the electric part of the field. The way we feel is the magnetic part of the field. Together, that creates the electromagnetic field that extrapolates off of us and interacts and relates with the world around us. And so the more that we can dial in those aspects, we will, so of the infinite field of possibilities, you're narrowing more and more in on the part of that field that you're wanting to have an experience with.
Mm-hmm. And you said something that's really important. The emotional piece, to want what you want, to imagine it, to visualize it, certainly to take action in whatever way you can in the real world to make it happen, and to allow yourself to feel the feelings of what it would be like to create that thing. See, the feelings help override the doubt. Because the feelings, they have their own charge, and we want to override, because the doubt's always going to be there, And the more that I work with people, and the more that I work with doubt, it's just trying to help. It's just trying to keep you vigilant. It's just trying, it's just trying to protect you. It's just trying to protect you from the idea that it might not work out. And it's like, thank you. Thank you very much. I see you there. Thank you. We're still going to do it this way anyway. But, and you just, but if you allow yourself to feel the feelings of, I'm really excited about this. I'm excited about the idea. I used this when I was writing this book. I didn't know that I was going to have, it was my first book. I didn't know I was going to have a publisher. I didn't know that it was going to be good. I just kept showing up, and feeling the feelings of like, this feels good. And let me tell you what else I did. I would send it to people who would say, Jonathan, this is brilliant. Right. And I would never send it to someone who would say, well, because I needed to increase my mana, and I needed to increase my focus, and I needed to feel good about it, because I know that those are the building blocks of conscious manifestation or magic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's so important to just be conscious of that process. Like, know that those things are going on. So when, just like we were talking about earlier, so when we do find that we've been sort of sitting in a field of consciousness of fear or frustration for a long time, it's like we have to kind of engage the conscious mind to make some changes around that. Mm-hmm. Now, one thing that you had mentioned in there was that around manifestation is that we need to be able to then engage and get the unconscious mind pretty much on board. That's, I think, in my mind, that's kind of the rate limiting step for a lot of people, because a lot of times people aren't completely aware of what the unconscious mind is doing. So you might consciously be saying, I want this, and then the unconscious mind is somewhere there saying, well, you don't deserve that. So how do we work with that piece of the unconscious mind? What's some of the practice that you do to help that piece of it?
Well, this is more than anything, this is about Ho'oponopono. And Ho'oponopono is about addressing the part of ourselves that is under a case of mistaken identity, that we're something other than divine, perfect, lovable, entitled beings. And we all learned early on, they're called formative years for a reason. And so we all learned early on that we are to think less of ourselves for whatever reason, that we're to say no to ourselves in some way. This could be abuse, neglect, and that kind of thing. But sometimes it's just about the way in which the child constricts against the pain of the world. And children take everything personally. So when things happen to them that are negative, that are scary, that are disempowering in some way, the way in which the child gains control of that is say, that's about me. That's something about me, Mm-hmm. And that gets lodged in there as a sense of self. And unexamined, it will show up when we want to do such and such, but there's an older part of us, a mistaken part of us, but an older part of us that's got a lot of clout because it's been around a long time, that says, you're not lovable enough to have that. You're not smart enough to have that. You're not good looking enough to have that. You're not whatever it is. And so the practice of Ho'oponopono is about extending love, and I go into that practice. It's sort of the penultimate chapter of my book, and really the crux of all of it. But what we're doing in that practice, and that practice is actually a way of life, but just to get back to the practice, is that we're extending love to that part of ourselves. We're aware that there's a child in there that learned he doesn't look right, that he'll never get, whatever. And why does he feel that way? Because love in some way was withheld. And so because now is the moment of power, we give that love now to that part of us, to that illness, to that fear, to that addiction, whatever it is. And we say, I love you. I'm so sorry that you feel that way about yourself. Please forgive me for all the times in which I let you feel that way. And thank you for coming along with my way now. But you need to let this go now, because I am here and I love you. And in the face of this love, this mistaken identity that you have doesn't really make sense. And I see you, and I'm sorry for the times when I let you, every time that I didn't attend to when you said I'm ugly, and I said, yep, you are, and that's the process. And over time, when you extend love to those parts of yourself, it gets to learn a new sense of who it is, and it starts to like you more. And that's the alignment of the mind and the body. And if you align the mind and the body, you are then alignment in love. Then you are in alignment with the big love that's just waiting for that to happen so it can shower you with its love.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the nature of that practice.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I love it. It's a beautiful practice, and it's almost like a bit of a prayer that you can go through with it when you check out the book, because it's a really powerful chapter. And you even talk about that practice itself is what heals the separation that happens with the different selves. And
Mhm.
I remember one of my old teachers, Dr. David Hawkins, I talk about a lot. He wrote a book a long time back, Power versus Force, and a number of other ones. But one of the things he would talk about was from a level of consciousness that forgiveness, unconditional love, and healing all calibrate within the same level of consciousness. So when you start to engage in any one of those, the other ones happen.
Mhm.
And I feel
Yeah.
like that's what that practice made sense to me around. That's kind of what it made me feel like.
Yeah, I would say that love is the tool. Love is the tool. Love it really does fix so much. And even in my practice, I can be brutally confrontational with someone, but if it's coming from love, I can get away with a whole bunch.
Yeah.
And as long as that's there. And one of the principles of Huna, Aloha, is love's perspective present? Because if I'm following the principles, if I'm thinking like a shaman, every choice I make, every thought I think, everywhere I go, everyone I invite into my life, I am looking, is love's perspective present?
Yeah,
You know?
it's so important. I was doing a talk a while back, and I was around that concept was just if we ask ourselves on a regular basis, how many choices are all the choices that we're making throughout the day, how many of them are based from a place of fear and how many are based from a place of love? And if you just start to slow it down and catch yourself as how often those are happening, it's actually amazing at how many times they are primarily being driven by something that you're not actually wanting to create more of in your world.
Yeah. I once heard a summation of, the Course in Miracles, which is a
Yep.
big book that I'm never going to read. but I once heard a summation of it. And it was that essentially what that entire 2,000-page book is getting at is that in any moment, love and fear are always there. They're right next to each other.
Yeah.
And it's which one you choose.
Yeah. Yeah. Just the flip
Yeah.
side of the coin.
Yep.
Yeah, and it's a really neat book. My wife and I have done that course, and it's like the first half of it basically is just to deconstruct the ego, sort of everything that we've been indoctrinated with to try and clear the vessel, and then it
Mm-hmm.
tries to fill back up with different
Mm-hmm.
larger truths to be able
Mm-hmm.
to expand the way you think and believe and whatnot. But this is what I think is just so neat is like you don't have to do that course. It's a long course to do it. It
Mm-hmm.
kind of takes you a year to kind of go through the thing.
Sure.
But one of the things that I really loved about your book, The Shaman's Mind, Huna Wisdom to Change Your Life, is it brought a lot of really important pieces from lots of different material that I've come across, and it was just all very in such a user-friendly way. So I really, if people have not read it yet, go and get the book because you could save yourself reading a lot of other stuff, I think, and get it in a very user-friendly way of what I think really pulls down some of the essence of it.
It's in general, it's mainly things that you've heard before. I've just never heard it so simply, elegantly put, and all in one place.
Hmm.
And I wish that I could say that I had something to do with that, but that's just the Huna system, and a lot of that actually comes from my teacher Serge King. It's just he just was able to really take these universal ideas and you have to unpack them because they're layers upon layers. But if you just follow the universal ideas, you really do enter into just such a more friendly, effective world and way of living.
Yeah,
And he talks about that. Huna is about learning to live successfully. You
I
know,
love that. It
yeah.
feels like a lot of times it's easy to go through life feeling like you're pushing the rock up the mountain. And I feel like when you start to really practice this stuff, and it's like you can kind of intellectually understand it, but you don't really know it until you actually put into practice and have experiences with it. But when you do, it doesn't feel like it amazes me sometimes at how things show up because you've kind of surrendered to the process, and that's when, of these infinite possibilities, ones that you would never in a million years ever consciously think of just show up and are moving in a certain direction, right? And I think, like you say, and other stuff, and if stuff is not happening, it's like that is also information. Helps you
Mm-hmm.
relook at what it is that you're trying to move towards, and maybe it needs to be in another direction.
Mm-hmm.
I want to be cognizant of the time here with you too, Jonathan, but
Mm-hmm.
we've touched on them back and forth, but can you just break down the 7 principles of Huna? Because I love a quote in your book. You say, no problem can exist or would ever have been created if the person with the problem had known these 7 things. And these are
Mm-hmm.
basically the 7 principles of Huna. If we can just kind of lay those out for
Sure.
people, and then ultimately you have to get into the book to really pull them out. And there's exercises with the different things too that are really valuable and
Mm-hmm.
that we're really enjoying too.
Yeah, so no problem would ever exist had the person with the problem known that they created it with their thoughts and beliefs. The world is what you think it is. That's the first principle. That they are inextricably connected to every solution for it in the entire universe, because the second principle says there are no limits, which means that anything is possible if you can figure out how to do it. The third principle says that the problem wouldn't. If the problem is there, you could. That means you've been giving your focus and attention to something. Give your focus and attention to something else that isn't related to your problem. The fourth principle says you can only do all that right now. Now is the moment of power. The fifth principle says, is love present? Because that's going to help a lot. Because if you're in love, you're in flow. That's aloha, the fifth principle. The sixth principle says you have all the power within yourself to do all that. And the seventh principle says if it still doesn't work, you can still try something else. Effectiveness is the measure of truth. So that means you just haven't found it. Try another process. Try something else. Be flexible.
Mm-hmm. Nice. And just start to pull those in, take a look at each one, and then just use it as a reflection for what's going on in your life, and then just go through them.
Mm-hmm.
Just play with them, have fun with it.
Mm-hmm.
But I honestly think it's like such powerful tools for big change in your life.
Mm-hmm.
Now, last question I have for you, Jonathan,
Yeah.
is from Shaman's perspective, from your perspective, given what is going on in the world right at the moment. I mean, when we look at everything from how a shaman's perspective would look at things like a pandemic, how it would look at the things like the division and the intense emotions that are going on, what would be the shamanic wisdom to look at all of this that's currently going on right at the moment?
Well, the Earth is going to win. So it's probably, and what is the Earth? What does the Earth want? The Earth wants to keep going, and we can't keep going as is. How do we? What's as is? Greed, hatred, separation, dominion over nature, profits over people. So disalign with what the Earth is asking us to disalign with. That's the reason why the Earth created this virus. Even from a shamanic perspective, the coronavirus, it comes from bats, and bats represent death and rebirth. And it's not just the death that we're all scared of. We're always, from a shamanic perspective, we're looking for death because rebirth is after that, and that's what this is. So disalign with those things. Get really and you're doing this. I'm sure that your listeners are doing this anyway. Get close to yourself. Get really close to yourself and really look at what matters to me. Where am I supposed to be living? What am I supposed to be doing? If you have a counterintuitive call to move in a different direction that feels more in service to the planet, that where your existence is serving or the collective in some way, follow it. Clean up your own mess so that it doesn't spill into the experience of another. That's a really low bar, but let's all start there because we're not even doing that.
Sage advice for crazy times. Jonathan, where can people learn more about your work? You've got the book out. I know you're in private practice too, and
Mm-hmm.
you do a lot of work around spiritual counseling and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
Where can people learn about your work? Where can they get in touch with you? Where can they find your book?
Sure. The Shaman's Mind, Huna Wisdom to Change Your Life. That's just going to be Amazon, any of the places where you buy books. You can reach me at jonathanhammond.com, JONATHANHAMMOND.com. And I do sessions in person and lots of virtual now, particularly now. There's also a calendar on there in terms of some events. I have a one-day workshop based on the book that's coming up in January. I have a monthly shamanic circle, which people can certainly attend. Some other classes, lots of articles and podcasts and that kind of thing. And that's all at jonathanhammond.com.
Wonderful. I'll make sure all of those links are in the show notes so people can click on them and get there. And Jonathan, what a pleasure to have you. Thank you so much. Really, really enjoyed our chat.
Good. My pleasure. Thank you so much. Aloha.
Aloha. Well, that was awesome. Thank you so much for taking the time to invest in your health and well-being. Since this podcast is brand new, reviews and subscribers are so vital for us to get off the ground and share this really important information. So if you found this information valuable, please post a review and subscribe to the podcast so you'll get our newest episodes. Also, if you know of someone who would benefit from this, please share it with them. You can also find us on Instagram at #InspireHealthPodcast. If you have a question that you'd like to be addressed, direct message me on Instagram or leave a comment on one of my posts. I would love to hear from you. And you can grab our show notes and free resources for each episode at inspirehealthpodcast.com. So be sure to go online and check it out.